Worklet.
Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to the React Native Show podcast. Before we dive into our topic of Remotion and animation, I want to plug something real quick. We have just released the the Ultimate Guide to React Native Optimization with the dedicated sections for animation, state management, stuff like that. So make sure to check this out right after you listen to this show with my great guest, Jonny Berger. Okay, thanks. Let's get on with the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the React Native Show podcast. I'm really excited about this one because I'm a huge Jonny Berger fan, and Jonny Berger is here with us today. Jonny is the creator of Remotion, a framework for making videos in React. Let's bring Jonny to the podcast. Hello, Jonny. How are you?
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Hey, like I said, I'm super excited. The first time that I saw you was on some of your podcasts talking about TypeScript or other things, and then several months, I guess later, I heard about this thing called Remotion, and then another week or two fly by, and then I made a connection that you are actually an author of this. So can you please tell us about something about yourself, your background, and then some elevator pitch for Remotion?
Yeah, for sure. So before I started Remotion, I was also making a lot of React Native apps, actually. I was doing this full time, and so also a lot of inspiration went into that later on. And yeah, that was my career before. I was just working for agencies as a freelancer to do React Native apps, always part-time. And I would also try to make my own projects and try to be a small entrepreneur with these React Native apps. But then 2 years ago, I created Remotion, which essentially is a way to make a video by writing React code. And
yeah, awesome. Actually,
since then we have.
Yeah, sorry, we have some lag on the connection.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
Let's try to not interrupt each other, maybe. So please finish your thought, and then I will go.
And since then, I've been full-time on Remotion, and we've been trying to push this idea of making videos in React further and building out a whole ecosystem. And that's now what I do all the time.
Awesome. There is a hope for us, for React Native developers, to branch out into entrepreneurship and stuff like that. I'm really excited to have you. When I first talked about Remotion on other podcasts that I'm on, I probably incorrectly referred to it as another render engine, another render platform for React. Can you say that it is another platform? Video is another platform, like native, like mobile, like Windows?
So when we talk about these different renderers, usually what we refer to are the different reconcilers. So there's like a reconciler for web, one for iOS, one for Windows. And that is also some custom JavaScript React code. Remotion uses the default reconciler on the web. So it works the same as a regular web React app, of course, with some special quirks. But if we are technically speaking about whether it is a special reconciler, it is not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I thought so. The me from 2 years ago was wrong, and I already knew that. So can you already said that some of the work in React Native space inspired Remotion. So why did you want to create this? What was the idea behind it? Did you need such a tool in your in your day-to-day work, or?
So animations I always found very interesting, and I would also try to put in a lot of animations in my React Native app using Reanimated, or before that came out, Animated. And of course, I was also like good friends with William, who has made this like a big part of his life, animations. And we were both excited about that. And then, so I made a React Native app actually, was almost done with it and wanted to put it in the store. And I was thinking about how do I promote it best, of course, with a video. So I brought out Adobe After Effects, which I had a bit of experience with it, but just randomly, once during running, I got the thought, wow, you know what? I think I would be more capable in making a good video if I programmed it in React. And that's how the idea started. And the idea at the beginning, and still, is just that we have one hook called use current frame. You put this in your React component, you get the current frame number, and based on that frame number, you can render anything. So it is up to you.
I will definitely ask you later in the episode how it works in my workflow. I want to stay on this high level for the next two questions, because I think those are really interesting for our audience. And those are, what is the biggest use case of Remotion? You just said that I'm a programmer, I made this app, I want marketing video for it. What are the, from 2 years of experience, from your users' experience, what are the use cases that you see that are the most important?
All right, so I think Remotion can be useful for people whenever they have either a data-driven video, if they want to animate some data, or in general, if they have a data set and want to render many videos with it. So whenever you do not just want to make one video, but many videos based on something, then I think Remotion can be valuable for them.
Yeah, definitely. I think on your webpage, you have like a collections of ideas of things that you can make with Remotion. Like, for example, you can post a video on Instagram 99 times a day from some tweets, right? So that's one of the use cases.
Yeah, definitely. You can automate all kinds of stuff with it. Since you are anyway programmatically creating the video, might as well fetch an API and then combine it with a GitHub action pipeline, for example, to then also post it somewhere. So there are a few cool bots made with Remotion. I can think of like a daily cinema program, which is on a cinema's Instagram story, or like some stock takers that are being posted daily on Twitter. That's a pretty cool use case.
Yeah, thanks. So another high-level question that I have is, how is it better, in what way it is better to write your video as a code as opposed to old traditional way of creating movies in, I don't know, iMovie, After Effects, stuff like that?
So I can think of a few ways you would like to use React to make your videos. One of them is if you like to load some data, maybe you want to hit an API or load a JSON. It is possible with After Effects, I believe, but it's not like they have made this a first-class workflow. I think it's fair to say that you need some hacks to do that. And especially like making these tools are suitable for making one video. But then if you want to make another video, you usually just change it and re-render and then change it again and re-render. They do not have as a design goal to render many videos or to create a template and create many derived versions of that, I would say. There are a few other interesting things about video editing. So like going back in history is pretty linear. You pretty much only have undo and redo, while with code you have Git, which is a much more powerful version control system, which has branches and you can cherry pick stuff. So that is a possible benefit as well.
From my coding background, one other possibility, one other benefit that I can think of is checking the PRs for someone. So if someone is designing a video, creating a video, you might not notice the small change in the background color, but code will not lie. You will see the small change in hex value or something like that. So yeah, it is obvious what code does. It is not obvious what is in this huge video of 20 minutes of 4K video. Yeah, let's go deeper then. Let's go to the low level of the workflow for Remotion. I'm a developer. I want to create 100 of programmatically generated videos. I want to use my API, and yeah, I probably would post stories of it on Instagram. How do I do it? How do I go about it?
Okay, so I always recommend as the entry point for starting with Remotion by typing in npm init video, and that will give you a node project, a template from where you can start the preview, which is kind of a small video editor with a timeline. And at the same time, you open up an editor. And in there, you will find just a React component. And in that React component, you can render anything that you want. And if you render something which is a little bit different, every frame, as time progresses, you will get some sort of animation. And then you render the video either by executing a CLI command, but there are also Node.js APIs which you can use to turn that code into a video. And we even have integrations for AWS Lambda so that you can render it in the cloud. So a programmer should hopefully feel pretty comfortable with these APIs. And therefore, I hope that it will also be easy to connect it with other APIs, for example, for posting the video in the end somewhere or taking in some data.
Yeah, so I go there, I create my component, I click generate video, and it generates my video. So in this component, in this, I call it web page, probably because it is a web page that, what are you doing with this web page so that it comes out the other end as a video?
Yeah, so it's true. It is just a web page. And essentially, once you define what the web page should render and what time it is, we then open a headless browser and seek to each frame in the video and take a screenshot of it. So we make a ton of screenshots. For a 30-second video, it will be around 1,000 screenshots. So there are a lot of images in a video. And then we use FFmpeg to encode these series of images into an MP4. There's also an audio component in it which works a bit differently, but I think for video, this is the flow.
Yeah, this is such a brilliant idea. Again, when I first heard about it, it seems so obvious, right? That you can generate a video from screenshots, because videos are like 30 frames per second. You could screenshot some, but like, I really congratulate you, sir. Like, it is, I think it is very popular now since it came out 2 years ago. I think you added the audio. It wasn't there at the beginning, right? Can you tell us some more about what was the most requested functionality of Remotion from developers, from users, that wasn't there on the day zero?
Yeah, so that we missed audio was one big lacking feature, and I think the most requested one. And the audio just works differently. So we also try to make like a React-like API for it, but then in the end, it kind of like gets mixed into a FFmpeg string, which maybe is not as beautifully simple as video is. And like you said, this idea is pretty straightforward, and I still want to maintain that and not make it much more complex than that, because it is also very easy to explain this idea. I think if you have listened so far, you already get the basic idea. But some other things that people have been asking is just more helpers to achieve something that looks nice. So if you just have a blank canvas and the timestamp of the frame, it is very, very hard to make something cool. So we added presets for nice animation curves, fonts, filters and effects, all sorts of stuff that abstracts the complexity of certain things.
Okay, thanks. What about going into the future? What do you think you will focus the most on in the next year when it comes to scaling the Remotion?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So I think there are like two main efforts that I'm going to be undertaking in 2023. One of them is for sure going to be continue to abstract stuff, try to make everything easier and therefore more powerful. And the other thing is try to widen the ecosystem a bit, try to make Remotion even less opinionated. So right now, Remotion assumes that you use Webpack and that you use Node.js and a headless browser. But there are like so many other things that we could try out. We could use different bundlers. We could, like, people ask, can I just render SVG only in Node.js and not use a browser? Then others ask, why do I need Node.js? Why can't I just render a video directly in the browser? And some people ask, oh, why do you use FFmpeg? Why don't you use this API? Why don't you use Rust? So we've been getting so many ideas, and some of them are good, like especially pointing us towards things that could make video encoding even faster. So I want to explore all of these things and hopefully adopt as many of them as possible. So rendering a video without needing a headless browser or using Rust for encoding the video to make it faster. This all seems very exciting to me, and I'm gonna be pursuing that.
Yeah. those seem like a very hard questions, some very hard ask you get from your users. I have some other tough questions for you. Let's go to the tough questions section. So, tough question about Remotion. Who shouldn't be using it? What is the use case that this tool is not made for and you can break your leg trying to use it inappropriately?
Okay, so you need to be a good React developer to use Remotion. I think at least at the moment, it really is a framework that is for React enthusiasts. If you have 2 videos and you want to trim them and cut them together and maybe resize them, it is painfully hard in Remotion, and I would recommend you to use iMovie for that. So we are aware that it's a bit tedious to do things that maybe people think are simple, and to deal with that, you need to be a React fan and an enthusiast. Otherwise, you might not be able to bear it.
Yeah. Jonny, I think we are about to wrap up the Remotion section, but there is one last question that I want to answer, and it is there anything else that you want to share with people about Remotion? I didn't ask you about it, and you really want to get it out into the world.
I would tell people, if you are interested in animations, making visuals, then you just try out Remotion. It's very easy to get started. Go to our website or type in npm init video. It's free and easy to get started. And I think it's one of the most fun ways you can use React. So I recommend you to try it out.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, when you are a React Native developer by day, you can be a video creator by night. It's as simple as that. Yeah. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, so I think React Native developers will feel very much at home. And a fun fact about it is that some functions like the interpolate function and the spring function, we have actually copy-pasted straight from Reanimated. So these are exactly the same. So that's one way you'll see the React Native influence on our sleeves.
Yes, actually, you took this question from my head because I want to move to the animations. This is the React Native Show podcast, so we cannot talk about Remotion only. My excuse to ask you and to talk about this exciting subject was that you are an expert in animations, and we didn't have an episode about animation yet, so let's create one. Let's go over the ways to animate things in React Native and in general maybe, but specifically in React Native. And yeah, let's go over the landscape of animations in React Native. Can you say some more about the connections between Remotion and React Native? What was the inspiration exactly? What other functions are copied and pasted and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I definitely came from that. So how animations work, like in terms of CSS, in terms of math, it is very similar. But if I might point out one difference to React Native, is that React Native animations are very performance sensitive. And this changes a lot the way how animation libraries work in React Native. So if I can compare it to Remotion again, what we do is we just re-render a component 30 times a second. And it doesn't really matter how slow it is. As long as you encode it into a video later, it will play in real time. Maybe the render time is long, but Remotion can afford this. Just use a hook and render something. In React Native, it is not so easy. The animation would be very slow if it would just mean updating a React component 30 times a second. So React Native has some utilities to accelerate an animation. The first one, of course, was the Animated API, which would animate some things without triggering a React Native re-render. And then Reanimated went a step further and outsourced these animations on a different thread so they could run even faster. So, okay, I've actually pointed out more differences than similarities, but here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, but I get your point. I get your point. There are some inspirations, but there are also major differences. And I get that Reanimated is not, its workflow has nothing to do with React Native. It has to do with Node. It has to do maybe with web, but React Native, probably you could use React Native web in your web project to create this animation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you could do both ways. So you can use React Native Web to make an animation in Remotion, and it actually is pretty common. And if we would bring Remotion to React Native, or let's think about what would be the most primitive way to create an animation in React Native. It would be to use no tools at all, except to, in a use effect, have like a set timeout or a set interval to continuously update the UI. So this would indeed create an animation. It would just not be a very impressive one performance-wise.
It's gonna be slow animation. It's gonna stagger a lot. Yeah, let's go back to the structure of this episode. So the structure that I have is I want to go from CSS, and because I feel like CSS is a precursor to React Native styling, but somehow we got styling from CSS, but we don't got the animations from CSS. Do you have any context around that? Do you know why is that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So we did not have CSS out of the box on native, right? Someone had to build that. So Yoga is the library that takes a subset of the CSS that we know from the web and applies it to the native layer. And I assume they took the easy bits or the good bits, but then when it came to animation, they realized that, hey, this is a different platform, and on this topic, maybe it makes more sense to be agnostic. And I agree with them that just porting CSS animations over directly would maybe have been a bit short-sighted.
Yeah, probably. So we got CSS out of the way. So the next level, the level 0 in complexity, is the out-of-the-box solution from React Native. And there are two different APIs in React Native that allow you to animate things. You mentioned animated already, so let's start from that one. Can you tell us what is it? How do you use it? What are the limitations? What can you do with it?
Sure. So also not being a complete expert, but I think Animated will animate on the same JavaScript thread as the rest of your app. So if you have a slow re-render, then your animation might also get stuck, unfortunately. But it avoids making a React re-render, so it does not set a state to do that. Then there's like a flag, use native driver, which might optimize it even a bit more and use something a bit more native, something in a lower layer. But I also don't remember on top of my head how that works.
I think that
it's a bit
flag
confusing.
only applies to some properties of the view, of the style, not all of them. So I don't, from the top of my head, I don't remember what are the properties that you could use it and what are that you cannot. But there are a lot of limitations on this. You can translate and scale, but you probably cannot change the height and width of the element.
That seems legit to me that this is the case. So I guess this brings us to the other way you have in mind, which improves on that, right?
Yeah, actually, I want to stay in the out-of-the-box React Native experience because I learned today that it's been in React Native core since 2015. So it's not new. I've first discovered it, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and it looked like magic to me. As you can write this one line of code, and it will automatically take your set up your animations. So I'm talking about LayoutAnimation, which is so damn simple API, but very limited. Basically, how it works is that you set, when you are about to change state, either right before it or right after it, you create this LayoutAnimation configure next animation, and then it takes care of this animation for you automatically. Mind blown. Me 4 years ago first used it. I was really, really impressed of React Native back then.
Oh yeah, LayoutAnimation is also a good one. I think it's very optimized even. I like to control my transforms explicitly. So left, top, scale, rotate, transform, and LayoutAnimation works a bit differently in that. So this was never my preferred way of animating in React Native, but I have to admit, for many use cases, this is a very good solution.
Yeah, yeah. So, like you said, I want to move to more advanced solution, but I also want to summarize the animated API. So in animated API, we have values that we can, animated values that change over time. We can interpolate them, and based on those values, we can assign some style properties to animated views and other things. Also, we can hook animated API to work with gestures. We can use pan responder or other mechanism. I forgot the other mechanism. The other mechanism is animated event, I think. So I want. So with this summarization, let's go to Reanimated, because Reanimated, I feel like, has counterparts to what I've just listed for animated. So yeah, fire it up. Tell me something about Reanimated.
Yeah, so first, maybe you have to distinguish between Reanimated 1 and Reanimated 2. they work very differently. And the Reanimated 1 syntax is, last time I checked, is still available and common and used in, for example, React navigation. And that API essentially created its own, like that API works by chaining, by currying functions together. So you could describe how an animation should look like in JavaScript by having functions like add, subtract, multiply, but you would not use the actual plus sign. You would use a function, and that would then translate into a native animation that runs off the UI thread. And these 30 functions that we have are just the way of constructing a language that the native UI thread understands. So this was a big innovation back then, because finally it was not all dependent on one single thread, and therefore the animations could be much faster. And also with these 30 mathematical functions that I mentioned, the animations could be more complex because the animated API does not implement all of them. And then Reanimated 2 made another big innovation by eliminating this math syntax that could get pretty complicated and allow you to write real JavaScript code. So instead of add 2, 2, you can now write 2 + 2. And those animations work in a different thread, but you still co-locate it in your normal JavaScript code. So you solve both things. You can still write regular JavaScript, use your normal variables, have higher familiarity, but still offload the animations to a different thread, which just is faster.
Yeah, actually, when I first saw the use Worklet, I don't know how it's called, but you use Worklet at the beginning of your function. I thought that this is not only the reanimated thing, that this is like a general thing that exists in a JavaScript. And then I saw some other projects that are not animation projects, have nothing to do with UI, but they still have reanimated as a dependency because they want to be able to use this use Worklet directive. So it is mind-blowing that we have a animation library that is a dependency for other libraries that have nothing to do with the UI.
Totally. I mean, it is a huge problem that JavaScript is single-threaded, especially in React Native. We deal with we also have to consider low-end devices, and running JavaScript single-threaded on that just is a problem in general. And worklets are one big step in the right direction, that we can do expensive calculations in another thread and keep the thread that draws the user interface unblocked. So we achieve more fluid user interfaces.
Yeah. So until now, we discussed how Reanimated 1 and Reanimated 2 was revolutionizing, right? Let's talk about, in terms of visuals, what they bring to the table.
Yeah. So obviously with Reanimated 2, since you can write a full JavaScript, like you can write regular JavaScript, you can create more complex animations. Another reason you can create more complex animations is that you can write faster code, and therefore you can have a higher performance budget, right? You can do more things, and if it take less times, you can do even more things and create even more awesome stuff. I think if I can bring in two other contenders, then like we can make a whole spectrum of ways to animate in React Native. So there are like really high level libraries like Moti, which are super easy to use, few lines of code, and they automatically animate things. But we cannot expect from them that you have full control over all keyframes and what exactly is being done. And then we have layout animations, which also have a bit of a preset, Reanimated 2 and 1, which leave a lot up to the developer, but are very fast. And if we want to go even lower, then it's about using not native to React Native libraries. So like animating using Swift or Core Animation, or using React Native Skia, where animations also work totally differently and on the GPU. And that's one of the hardest ways to animate. So I would say you need to think about what you want to do, how much control do I need, what is my performance budget. All these libraries also have different performance characteristics, and based on that, you need to find like the right tool on the spectrum.
Yeah, that's a great summary, much better than I would have done. Thanks a lot for that. Thanks for mentioning Mori and all the other. Actually, there is it's not a library, it's a player for After Effects JSON files. It's called Lottie, and I feel like this is the next step forward, even because you don't write the animations yourself, you just play them. You leave the animation configuration to your designers, and you just get the JSON file and you just plug it into your application, and it works, and it's quite performant, I would say. And I feel like there is a similarity between what we have in Lottie and what you have in Remotion. To go full circle back to Remotion, what you have in Remotion as a player. So player takes React code in some form, I don't know how it works, and then it plays it. It's not a video that the player from Remotion is playing. This is what is it? And if you think you could somehow plug it into React Native world so that we can play other React components.
Yeah, totally. Like Lottie is a very interesting format. It is the only one that we have talked so far, which is a format. So you express your animation in JSON, and you can also export it and use it somewhere else and just play it. And it's kind of like the animation is already predefined, right? So let's talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of Lottie. Since it is already predefined of how it's going to work, we cannot make it react to user gestures or to a scroll view. That is one big limitation of Lottie. However, one huge advantage of Lottie is that it's very easy to author, because, or like, you can offer much more complex animations because you can do them visually in After Effects, where you can like drag keyframes around and create these animations with your mouse, rather with code, which makes it much more easy to create. It's almost like an anti-pitch for Remotion, but anyway. So you can author really complex animations using Lottie.
Yeah. I don't think it's an anti-pitch for Remotion. Like we said in the first part of this episode, like you have your use cases, you use the proper tool, and for animations, like you said, Lottie cannot react to anything that is happening in the runtime. This is predefined, so you might just as well. If you have graphic design, like I find that developers are not really usually good graphic designers. So if you give them the spec of animation, they can write it, but then if you give them the animation itself in a JSON file, it's much easier. It's simple as that, and someone else can do the figuring out what colors to use, what speed, what interpolation, stuff like that. Yeah, I feel like we covered a lot here in this episode about Remotion and animations. Is there anything at all you would want to say about animation or Remotion? Please do it now, because we are about to end the episode.
All right. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on. It was like super nice to talk about that. And of course, CallStack is also spearheading it into a very good direction. And you have a lot of people who are able to animate a lot of things. Like the thing that you said in the end is a really good point that I think reflects the reality a lot. For all the techniques to animate except Lottie, you need to have someone who can code and has a good taste and skills to bring these visuals into the code. And I think that's a challenge that is being faced a lot, where with Lottie you kind of have like a workflow where a designer can do their thing in After Effects and just hand it off to a React Native developer, and you don't need anybody who is both a designer and a developer. So in real life, this is most often the case, and I think that's why Lottie is a solution for which is very widely used.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much, Jonny. It was a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much, CallStack, for letting me do this, for letting me talk about Remotion on the React Native Show podcast. I hope to catch Jonny soon on another podcast when we can talk about other things. And for this episode, it is over. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks a lot, and thanks, CallStack, for everything that you're doing.